So the Ukraine war, there's one of the protagonists, Victoria Newland and her cookies. I've actually taken some notes as well, so let's have a part two to yesterday's riveting upload. So communism the USSR crumbled by the early 1990s. Two of the most controversial figures possibly ever in Russian politics are now and will always be Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin. Gorbachev and Yeltsin both made a monumental error of judgment. They both believed what the West would say to them, including no NATO expansion. They wanted to do the best for their country. However, I'm not Russian, but I believe there's a lot of Russian people really don't like them. So the country was communism ended. All the former Soviet bloc countries went on, did their own thing. Russia became its own nation state. And for the next 10 years, oligarchs just attacked Russian natural resources. Now we know from the past year that the natural resources in the country are more or less boundless. So oligarchs got in there and started stealing the oil, the gas, the timber, the minerals. So the 1990s was a terrible decade for Russia. And as I say, I believe that Yeltsin and Gorbachev probably thought they were doing the correct thing. However, they made a mistake in believing the West. So by the end of the 1990s, Russia was kind of on its backside. Then in 1999, I believe Boris Yeltsin made Vladimir Putin one of the most controversial figures on the planet, the Prime Minister. Then by the end of 1999, beginning of the year 2000, he became the President of Russia for the first time. Now early on in his presidency, he managed to get rid of a lot of the oligarchs. There's still lots of them there, but he managed to get rid of a lot of the oligarchs, denationalised Russia's energy and gas infrastructure. There were high oil prices back then, so the economy grew by about 7% per year through the 2000s, which is quite remarkable. You know, that's 10 years of 7% growth. The Russian economy by 2010 was 70% greater than it was when Putin took power, right? So let's get up to around about the 2000 mark. So we did quite a jump here. Everybody seemed happy, didn't they? Russia was getting back on its feet. Europe was doing well. 2001, we had the Twin Towers. The Russian government offered America support. And the Americans, in my opinion, attacked the wrong country. 9/11 looks like it was a Saudi Arabian job on America, and America decided to invade Iraq. That, to me, was to steal oil. It wasn't anything to do with the Twin Towers. So they used an opportunity, a horrific opportunity by all accounts, to their own benefit to go and help control the world's oil supply. So move on a couple of years, and then the most important date in the whole thing was 2014. The first war in the Donbass. So there's a thing in the Ukraine called Euromaidan. Let's go back to Victoria Nuland and let's hear what she had to say. This is her in Ukraine in 2014, and this is a tape-recorded message of a telephone call she had with somebody discussing what Prime Minister they were going to get in the Ukraine. So I'm going to make a connection here. And again, this is me spitballing, it's my own take on it. You don't have to believe anything I say. However, it kind of looks
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, you know, the EU.
But that is exactly what reportedly
happened
between US's...
In 2014, Victoria Nuland goes across to the Ukraine with her famous bag of cookies, tries to hack the country up, and there was a thing called the Euromaidan protests. Most of you will be able to remember this. Now, that happened on, I wrote this down, the 16th of February 2014, right? On the 20th of February 2014, the Russian military, now it's said that Russia invaded the Crimea. They didn't. Russia has one of the biggest, possibly its biggest naval base in the Crimea. It's called Sevastopol. The Russian military were already in Crimea. So what they did was, Victoria goes over, we've got the Euromaidan protest. That was on the 16th of February. By the 20th of February, the Russians smelled a big rat, and they got their military to capture all the Ukrainian police, local authorities, and the Ukrainian military that were in the Crimea. Not one shot was fired, not one person was killed. But basically, the Russians, through any state authorities of the Ukraine out the Crimea, they then had an election, and I believe the Crimea was about 90% ethnic Russian. Most of the people in the Crimea spoke Russian. They had a vote and they said, we see what's happening with this lady here, we see what's happening in Kiev, we don't want anything to do with it. Our bread's better buttered with Russia. Did that happen? Was it an evil takeover? I'm going to go with the people of the Crimea decided they didn't want anything to do with it. Now, by April, 6th of April, was when the first war, maybe the war in Donbass is still continuing to today. By the 6th of April, there's a monitoring organisation in Europe called the OSCE, the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. The OSCE put monitors into the Donbass. Again, the Donbass area is to the southeast of the Ukraine. Again, mainly ethnic Russian speakers. It composes of 4 areas, which is Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, and I can't remember the name of the fourth one. But again, these are all Russian-speaking areas. So the Ukrainian military had built up a massive force along the border of the Donbass. The people in the Donbass started a militia and started fighting the Ukrainian military. Within a short space of time, they kicked 7 colours of shit out the Ukrainian military. And how did it? I think the population of the Ukraine was about 40 million. The population in the Donbass is 5 or 6 million. So how did such a small group of people manage to do in such a big military? The Ukrainian military wasn't very well service maintained. There were a lot of oligarchs in the Ukraine which stole a lot of the resources out of the Ukraine. So the Ukrainian military at that point wasn't very, very powerful. And it's really obvious to anybody with a brain that the Russian military possibly were behind the tactics and the arming and training of the Donbass militias. So they went in there and kicked 7 colours of shit out the Ukrainian military, surrounded them, encircled them. They were about to get annihilated. And this is where we're going to leave this video, because tomorrow is the anniversary. What happened was a thing called the Minsk Protocol appeared. I need to look into it, I haven't, but I believe it was France and Germany contacted the Russians. They knew the Ukrainian army was encircled. They knew they could see what was going to happen next. So they offered security guarantees to the people of Donbass. I think that might be when the OSCE went in, the Organisation for Cooperation and Security in Europe. And they monitored the shelling between the two factions across the border of the Donbass. The Ukrainian military were shelling, and they still are, shelling the people in Donetsk and Lugansk. It's we've got a historical record. You can go and check them out online. They were counting all the shellings that happened every day. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. We got to 2014. This is the tickly bit. The last thing I'm going to say is, I think by 2014 the Russians had it. They could see what was coming, And at that point, I'm sure the military in Russia, the Russian government says this is going to go down to a fist fight. It's going to be baseball bats and knives between us and the Ukrainian government. And I believe 2014, 2014, that was a magic number. I believe that's when Russia started rearming, re-equipping, retraining, and getting its military back into shape. They waited from 2014 till last year to go all that Russian way and start causing chaos. But that's what I think. Again, this is based in nothing. I tacitly followed Russian politics for years, and if you look at the timeline, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? The Russian military threw out the Ukrainians from the Crimea. The Euromaidan happened with Victoria and Nuland and fuck the EU, all that carry on. So there was a CIA overthrow of the Ukrainian government in 2014. The Russians thought the CIA are going to try to go for Crimea. Get rid of them. Was the revolution in the Donbass started by the Russian government? Maybe. However, we had Ukrainian fighting Ukrainian from that point in. Tomorrow we'll get a bit more contemporary. Well, it's going to be an anniversary of the war, but a shocking anniversary. We'll discuss why it's lasted a year, how we could possibly bring this thing to a close, and why two Slavic countries are slaughtering each other on the battlefield. There's a cheery one from your old dog today. Right, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.